Woo! Awesome, guys. Congratulations. You're absolutely crushing it going through this. It's the coolest thing ever. I want to dive really deep into criticism in this module because, like, it's such a terrible, like, soul crushing, like, experience and trait. And if you can abolish it and just get it out of your life, like, everything would change so much faster because the impact and the growth and the development that you have, like, it all skyrockets, and it all stems from your ability to, like, overcome this negative force. So let's get, like, right over to the computer and look at, like, an insane example of this. So long time ago, like, there was Woodruff Wilson. Holy shit, I just did everything wrong. And so a long time ago, there was this huge fight between Roosevelt and President Taft. And so, like, Roosevelt, he did his 2 terms, and President Taft was the guy who wanted to replace him for the Republican Party, which was, like, super exciting. And like, early on in this campaign, like, Woodrow Wilson, he was, like, criticizing these guys, and they were criticizing the war that was going on at the time, First World War. And when Roosevelt left, like, he's super like, happy guy, was supporting Taft, super positive, super excited about it. And then he went to, like, Africa and, like, shot a bunch of lions and had, like, a huge party, which I guess is cool. Then he came back to America, and all this positivity just, like, been destroyed, and he was, like, super negative and super upset, and he didn't want Taft to be president, and he said he was, like, awful, and anyway, he denounced him for his conservatism and basically was like, you're the worst guy ever. He was negative. He criticized him, and he, like, tried to bring him down and destroy him. And so he went out and he formed, like, his own new party, the Bull Moose Party, and he tried to, like, alter the course of history with, like, this third party and trying to win the election, and it, like, destroyed the campaign, right? So the Bull Moose Party, they won, like, what, like, 2 states, and it's, like, split up the Republicans over Taft, and nobody could figure out what they were doing, and it just crushed everybody. And so Roosevelt, like, he blamed Taft for being, like, this awful guy and saying he was super mean. But, like, what did Taft think, right? Like, did Taft think it was his fault? Like, no, right? Like, people don't want to blame themselves, right? And he didn't really have anything to blame himself for. Like, Roosevelt just got super upset. And with, like, tears in his eyes, Taft said, I do not see how I could have done any differently from what I have. Like, who's to blame? This criticism that Roosevelt had, like, it will not persuade Taft that he was wrong about his policies or his conservatism or whatever. But instead, like, this criticism, this negativity is just gonna, like, go into a bubble around Taft. And it's gonna make him want to bounce it back and defend himself, right? And justify himself. And, like, he's literally crying and saying he doesn't see what he could have done differently. Because what? Well, because when you criticize people, it just makes them defensive and gives it, like, they just want to have reasons to defend themselves, which just destroys them. You see it, like, so much in politics over and over again. And this idea of, like, literally the exact same concept in the Teapot Dome oil scandal, right? The Teapot Dome oil scandal, where, these guys in Congress, they got control over a ton of the Secretary of State of the Interior. The Secretary of the Interior, he was entrusted with, like, leasing out government oil reserves for, the Elk Hill and the Teapot Dome. These are oil reserves that were set aside for, like, the Navy, and he was going to give them out to, like, these private companies on a lease basis, right? And so instead of, like, letting people bid on them on these, like, huge contracts that were worth, like, tons of money, right? Because these, like, really big, oil wells, right, reserves. He gave, like, the whole contract to his friend. And this is why, like, you really want to, like, win friends and influence people. Because, like, can you imagine being this guy right here that, like, the Secretary of the Interior gives, like, literally millions, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of, like, oil contracts to, just because, like, he was his friend? Like, how cool is that? Like, isn't that crazy? That's just insane. And so this guy, in turn, gave the Secretary of Interior a loan for like $100,000, which was like a whole lot at the time. And then he orders like all the U.S. Marines to go over to this land that he like just gave to his buddy, and like fight off all the competitors and push all the competitors away, so it's only his buddy's land and his buddy can make all the money from getting all the oil, with guns and with bayonets and just pushing them away. And so these guys were so pissed off, and so they went to court and they like sued everybody, and like the whole administration like got threatened, and the whole party was threatened, and basically this Secretary of the Interior guy got put into jail and got sent to prison. And he was like condemned so much publicly, and everyone told him he was wrong and he was terrible and he was awful, and like he betrayed the world and all this crap. He got like all this anxiety in his mind and in the president's mind, and everyone was so upset and so sad. Wife was at this conference, right? And as she's at this conference, everyone's like barraging her and saying, you know, oh my gosh, your president has been, or your husband has been like heart-stricken, and he's so upset and so sad because his friend betrayed him, and he had this terrible thing that happened to him, and everyone was so upset and so sad, and the worst person ever. And when she heard this, right, she sprang up from her chair. She wept. She shook her fist at fate and screamed, you know, her husband was never betrayed by the Secretary of the Interior, never betrayed by anybody, and his whole house is full of gold that would not tempt him to do any wrong. He would never do anything bad, and that like there was nothing wrong with this huge scandal that went on, and this like total lie, and that no one was betrayed, and that nobody was slaughtered, and that nobody did anything wrong, and that like nothing bad happened whatsoever, and it wasn't her fault, it wasn't anybody's fault, and that like her husband was like the best guy ever. Why did she like fabricate the story? Why was she defending herself so intensely when like all the facts said that it was like this terrible scandal? She's saying that nothing bad happened at all because she's being attacked, right? And so often, like, you know, even like light criticism or basic criticism, like people will just have like this criticism. Maybe sometimes they even think it's like constructive criticism, but like even constructive criticism to defense mechanisms, right? And it's gonna lead people to defend themselves. Mechanisms. And people defend themselves and they justify themselves and they lie their mistakes and their fears and their problems with like what they see as the reason for their failure, the reason for their success, the reason for their growth. Like it's all based in their core, right? Their interior, like everything that happens to them stems from the actions they do and what they take. And so as they're being attacked and as they're being threatened, and as like, you know, this is basically like destroying like their personality and their growth, and it's attacking, you know, the first lady. Like all she's going to do is defend herself and push away and push, right? Because up to her, like for her, this is a threat to her, and this is a threat to her being, and so she just wants to defend herself. And so criticism, like, it's not going to change her perspective, and it's not going to make her shift like her thinking or what she does or how she perceives the world around her. All it's going to do is create this bubble around her that she's going to try to push out all the truth and all the facts, because it's so difficult to look objectively at the world around you and to really take that step out of your own body and like back up and say what's really going on here. Like, you can't do that. You can only do that when you're relaxed. You can only do that when you're in a state of tranquility and clarity. And as people are attacking her, like, they're destroying her ability to step out of her own body and realize what's really gone on here and how this was like actually a humongous problem. She won't look at it. She won't understand that if she doesn't have the time to reflect and the time to like understand what's actually going on here and the time to just look at it objectively from her own point of view without the threat of others, without like this challenge that's coming from the people around her, because that is just devastating for her, and it's gonna crush her ability to think and to perceive and to move forth and to have the success that she wants, because all of that stems, right? All this reflection and all this growth comes from your ability to back up, and you need to let other people back up in their own lives by never criticizing and only being positive. Because when you're positive to people, what it does is it facilitates this dissociation of where they are from where they should be. And it allows them to get to this point faster where they're able to reflect and grow because they're surrounded with positive energy that brings them to that peak state and elevates them and allows them to succeed because they're focusing on their growth and their determination, their development, instead of trying to like get the ground set and defend themselves and back up their ideas. Like, you don't want to criticize people or else it's just going to lead to this huge freaking mess. And people will like, I mean, she literally like said this whole thing was okay because she was being criticized. She didn't know what was going on. She was being attacked, and you never want to attack people. It'll just destroy your ability to communicate and kind of more importantly, your ability to connect and persuade and to move on to that next level of growth and significance, which is just awful. And it's so powerful. So this keeps going on and on and on, and eventually it gets over. And because people are like human, right? And they understand that like, so it's just like this human nature of like blaming others, and you just have to sort of get away from it and stop blaming others and instead focus on like the development and the growth and accepting your own responsibility and giving people the space and the time to sort of, you know, reflect and say, okay, well, maybe this is my fault. And then they'll stop blaming others, but they'll only stop blaming others and realize their own responsibilities when they have the space and you're not like forcing things onto them. I remember like, you know, a long time ago, like sort of after my parents separated, like my dad, he would want to talk to me like every single day, and it was like this idea, like kind of my mom's doing it now that I'm going off to college. It's so weird. This idea that like this connection is super important. This relationship is super important, but like it's if you're trying to like force things onto people and you're trying to like call people every single day and you're always in their face and you're always like going super hard, like it's gonna alienate them. And these relationships really only were able to significantly develop and really connect with one another and start to grow in strength and prosperity and really deepen this connection. After my parents, you know, they like were able to back off and say, look, I care, but not that much. And so just give me a call when you're free. And like at the beginning, right, you know, they would call me all the time. So it was like this massive amount. So as they started to back off and take their own responsibility and let me focus on like my life, at first, like you have this drop, right? You have this dip and it goes down and down. Cause like you're getting used to this new environment and used to this growth. And then over time, it starts to increase because it's voluntary, right? And this is the point right here where it's like, you know, an internal shift. And that internal shift is the moment where others realize that like, you know, this is the time that it took for like me and for so many people. Like you have this time where you need to reflect, and then you reflect and you grow, and then you have this internal shift. And then for the rest of the time, right, it's all action, right? It's all action based on this reflection that allows you to get to this point. And so then like more cause deeper connections and so much more growth because you have like your own personal freedom and you're giving others the ability and the connection that they can have with themselves to have the development that they want in their life. So which is so powerful, and you have to let people go through this shift on their own without criticism, right? You know, it used to be like my mom would text me like all the time, why aren't you calling me? Oh my God, you're not spending enough time with me. Oh, this is the worst thing ever. I can't believe you. And like, what's that gonna do? It's gonna lead me to what? Be defensive, right? You can't be defensive. You need to focus on like letting the other person reflect and grow and have that shift that they desire so they can get to this future state that's gonna be so much more powerful and so much greater. And it all stems from really just back off and care. All of the criticisms that were launched at them, like they never really connected with them and they always kind of bounced away. And you know, even though they went to prison or even though they were condemned or killed, like they were always what? They were always justifying themselves. And that's all criticism does. It leads to justification, it leads to defense. And even though they were like hurt, they always said like they didn't know that they were evil. They thought they were really good. They had like this really positive mental image because to them this mental image was all they had to grasp onto as people were constantly attacking them. You know, people were always saying like Al Capone, huge gang member, he's the worst guy ever. And so he was always forced to defend this barrier, to defend this mental force field around his body. And he was never really able to escape this barrier, right? He couldn't, you know, objectively escape and look at his life and say, you know, maybe I should like not always kill people with machine guns. Like he never got to that point where he could just zoom out. Instead he was always super locked into his life because everyone was always criticizing him. And so because of that, he was never able to have an internal shift, internal change that like would have saved so many people's lives and changed everything, right? And it's just, it's so ridiculous. And you sort of see it exemplified in Lincoln, like Carnegie, Dale, he like loves to talk about Lincoln. He wrote like a whole book on Lincoln before he wrote How to Influence and Influence People, and he talks so much about Lincoln's life. And with Lincoln, like, you know, on the morning when he was like shot in Ford's Theater, and he's like laying down in this bed, and he is, you know, facing like, I mean, it's just terrible, right? He's been injured, and he's like bleeding everywhere, and it's like the worst thing ever, and he's like super afraid of, it's just, oh my god, so bad. He lays there and he looks at the Secretary of War, and he says, you know, like, this is the perfect person who would never criticize. And like all of his success in dealing with people came from his ability to be positive. And in this moment where he's like so hurt, what keeps him going is what? It's one thing. It's positivity, right? And this positivity is so huge. I mean, it changes like absolutely everything in his life. He was so successful because, like, when he was young, right, he would write all these letters to politicians and to local people, and they'd be like these super negative letters, and they would be like the meanest things ever, and he would be like, you know, negativity, you're the worst, blah blah. And he would like ridicule people publicly in the newspaper and all over the place. And so he would send these people, right? And as you attack people and as you criticize people, what it does is they get like super upset and super angry, and they're like, grr, I don't like Lincoln. And this resentment that he created by circulating negativity and creating a mean message to somebody, that negativity, it lasts for life. It's huge, right? It just crushes the any potential there was for a solid relationship for them, which is just insane. And it happened so often. And he was like a practicing lawyer, but he would like openly attack people with these terrible mean letters. And he did it way too much. And at one point in like 1842, he ridiculed this politician named James Shields. And he was just so mean. And he published this letter in the paper. It was like anonymous. And then James found the letter and he found the paper. And he was like, oh wow, this is like really mean. Who wrote this? And then he figured out that Lincoln wrote it. And basically he gets on his horse and he goes over to, you know, Lincoln's house, and he finds him. And he says, look, you know what? I'm gonna challenge you to a duel. And he challenges him to a duel. And for months and months, Lincoln like goes to this guy and he gets trained on like how to use a broadsword, because he's got like really big arms, and he thinks if he can figure out how to use a broadsword, he'll be really well prepared to fight this guy who was super pissed off at him. And he's super pissed off at him because Lincoln sent negativity and criticism and just these terrible comments into his life through this paper, through this public work, right? And so he's like publicly condemning him and publicly destroying his personality and destroying his image, right? And so to him, like, what people think about him publicly, what anybody thinks about anyone publicly is so important to them. And people will do anything really to like increase the public image, right? Because they want to look good to other people. They want to get a feeling of significance, a feeling of importance from other people. And so as this process goes on, right, Lincoln is hurting his public view, his public opinion. And it's so important to him that he maintains a high standing and high amount of respect, right? Because respect is so important, and it changes absolutely everything the instant that you can command it in all aspects of your life, which is so powerful. And as they go through this duel, he's like on duel day. He's been training for months really to like fight this guy. And they're sitting on this sandbar on the river, and they're like about to basically, like, one of them is going to die. And it could have been Lincoln. There could have been like no president if he lost his duel. And sort of like at the last second, you know, their wives or their girlfriends or whatever, they come in and they're like, don't fight. And so they get them not to fight, and it dies down, and they kind of split ways and part. And from that point on, for the rest of Lincoln's life, He never criticized. Again, he learned the most valuable lesson in the art of dealing with people, and it's that you never want to ridicule anybody. He never wrote and sent an insulting letter again. And from that time on, he never criticized anybody for anything. And that is what made him one of the most likable and profoundly impactful presidents and people on the planet. He changed so many people's lives. That's such a huge impact because he didn't criticize anyone. You never want to criticize anybody, because all that criticism is going to do is alienate them and push them away and hurt them, right? And so if all it does is negative things, like in the short term, sure, you know, it feels really good to kind of vent some rage, and it'll feel really nice to have like this you know, fume out on the world. But in the long term, it's going to destroy this relationship, and it's going to absolutely crush his connection with those around him. And it's awful, right? You don't want to criticize. And so he never ever does it again. And here's like this great example of it. I think we'll finish on this because it's so powerful. There was this battle in the Civil War, and there was this river, right? And it was like this dark, misty, steamy night, but it was really like just sort of dry. Like it hadn't rained in a while. Or no, it was raining. Like, so there was like a ton of rain, right? And so this river was like overflowing. It was so huge, so filled up. And as this river is like overflowing, the Southern troops, you know, the rebellion, the rebelling South, their whole Confederate army is like they're forced up against this creek, and they have nowhere to go. Like the river, it's just too violent. It's going too quickly. There's too much going on, and they can't really cross this river, and so they're basically trapped because the river, like, it's surrounding them in their entirety, and they have nowhere to go. They're on Union soil, and the entire army is like right over here, obviously like a little bit further away in reality, but like they're so close. And if they like vastly outnumbered them, and they had more arms and more guns, and they were like better prepared for this fight, and it was just like huge. Like all they had to do was one simple thing. All they had to do was go over here, attack these guys, and like kill them, and then they would have like won the war, and that'd be that. The war would be over, right? And so there's this general, and this general doesn't know what to do, so he goes to Lincoln, and Lincoln sends him a telegram, and he like specifically says, go attack these people and win the war and kill them. And it's so powerful because this battle, like, he sends him in, okay? He says, do it! But this guy, for like whatever reason, just he cannot like get himself to do it. And even though like everybody's telling him to go in and fight, like these guys, the troops, the group, their army, they're so dazed and they're so confused and they're so upset, they just have no clue what to do. And he directly says, go attack them. And then he like disobeys these commands, disobeys everything, and just sits there and doesn't do it. And everybody, like in the whole Union, is so pissed because like the next day this river kind of dies down a little bit, and these guys they cross over to their homeland, and they leave and they escape and they get out, and they lose their chance. You know, they are gone, and these guys they just don't have anything that they can do now to save them. There's nothing left, and they're defeated, right? They missed this one opportunity that would have like literally ended the entire war years and years earlier. And it was awful. I mean, if there was like any reason for Lincoln to be ridiculously pissed, like this was it. So much in saying he's totally incompetent. But Lincoln, he stands here, right? And he stands tall, he stands proud. And he realizes that he needs to have what? He needs to have malice towards none, and charity for all. And he knows that he cannot judge this general, right? And he'd seen it before, right? Like when he judged this one guy, he judged him, and so because he judged him and he insulted him and attacked him, he was judged himself, right? And he was attacked and he was threatened and he was criticized because he criticized somebody else. And he realizes that like the way to go forward is not to criticize individuals. And he knows that like even though this battle would have been so easy to win, like he can't judge him. He doesn't know what's going on, right? He's not in the same situation as this general. And even though like, you know, the Southern Army and the Confederates, like they were totally trapped and in a very, very, very like easy to overcome a situation. They could not escape whatsoever. And Lincoln sent direct orders for this golden opportunity to capture the army and end the war. He wasn't in the same situation as this general, as this guy Meade, right? And so like Meade is in a totally, like this general's in a totally different situation with his troops. And his troops have just gone through like the Battle of Gettysburg and had like this ridiculously like horror-filled, bloody, destructive, awful wartime attack. And it's just crushed who they are and what they do. And he just refuses point blank to do this. And so Lincoln, he's furious, right? Bitter disappointment. And he realizes that he needs to chill out, and that the reaction he has here will determine the faith and the loyalty that all of his generals have towards him, right? And it's gonna, just like, you know, managing, you know, a group of individuals like in a company or employees or anything, right? It's the same in politics. You know, he's like these guys' bosses, and you know, if he's super mean to them, like it's gonna destroy their ability to do quality work. And so he sits down and he writes this letter, and he has like the most calm tone possible. Like you gotta understand, like this guy basically just like killed thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. They're gonna have to fight tens of thousands of people. They're gonna have to fight this war. And I want to read you this letter, and I want you to like when I read this to you, understand like how restrained this is. And coming from him, this was like literally the meanest thing he'd ever written in the entire year and ever since he had this duel. And so let's go through it. It says, "My dear General, I do not believe you appreciate the magnitude of the misfortune involved in Lee's escape. He was within our easy grasp, and to have closed upon him would, in connection with our other late successes, have ended the war. As it is, the war will be prolonged indefinitely. If you could not safely attack Lee last Monday, how could you possibly do so south of the river, where you can take with you very few, no more than 2/3 of the force you then had in hand? It would be unreasonable to expect, and I do not expect, that you can now effect much. Your golden opportunity is gone, and I am distressed immeasurably because of it." So sad. That was like the meanest thing he could write. Like there was like barely any mean words in that, right? Why? Because Lincoln had been living his whole life in a state of positivity and positive energy, and never did criticism cross his mind. It was always compliments and collaboration. And so because of that, he realizes that like he cannot criticize, because criticism is so evil. And Meade never saw this letter because he never mailed it. It was found among his papers after his death. And like after he wrote this letter, he thought to himself, he can't be upset, and he doesn't understand his perspective. And he would probably do the same thing that Meade did if he was in Meade's situation, right? If he had the same background, the same experiences, the same reality that he was living in, like Lincoln probably wouldn't have done it either, right? And so even though it would make him feel so much better to send this letter, and it would like really relieve his stress, he realizes that it's more important to have faith in the people that he's working with, in his community, in his group. And it's so much more important for him to like not condemn this guy, right? Because if he sends this letter, all it's gonna do is make me justify himself. It's gonna make this general be defensive, right? And you don't want him to be defensive. Maybe he'll like resign from the army. Maybe he'll like stop being a good commander in the future, right? And he's a really good general. He doesn't want to like make him upset, make him sad, and crush his future, right? He wants him to be happy. He wants him to succeed. Because if Meade succeeds and he leads the army well, and this general succeeds, then everybody succeeds, right? He's just the leader. This is just like one of his members that he's working with. And so it's so important that they come together And instead of having criticisms, instead of having rebukes, instead of having mean things that are going to end in futility and not really change anything, he decides instead that it's so much more powerful to just sit back, relax, and care, but not that much. And it's very, very difficult because this was a tough situation. And yet the instant that he can zoom out and say, hey, you know, not a big deal, chill out, it's okay. Like everything changed in his life. And he went from like, you know, this state of criticism and constant like demoralization of others to like literally being one of the best leaders on the planet. Why? Well, it was all because of his ability to connect with others and say, look, you know what? I'm gonna back off, I'm not gonna criticize, and instead, I'm just gonna let them do their thing. Because like, do you think this guy knew that he was like in deep stuff when he lost this battle? Like, of course he knew, right? Like, he understood that like, holy crap, we just lost, like, we just like could have won the war and we didn't. And so like, he already feels awful and he knows that this is terrible. And so often, like, if you've got a problem with someone you're working with, like, they already know what the problem is. They don't like need you to go and tell them, yo, you messed up. Like, they know. They're already like internally beating themselves up because of it. And so often, like, you don't understand, or at least I didn't understand for a really, really long time, that like, if I had like a teammate or I was working with a coder and we had this one situation where like everything was going super, super awesome and we had like this rollout and we were getting ready to go for clients, and then like everything crashed like the day before and like it was awful and everything got destroyed. Like, that like was so demoralizing and everyone was so upset because of that. And like, there's no need for you to go and criticize people, right? Because all that's gonna do is bring you from this like state where you're in the middle to like just crushing everything possible for your growth, right? And it's so important. Like people know when they make a mistake and they want to fix their mistake on their own. But when you criticize them and when you call them out on that mistake, it makes them defensive. And instead of working towards progressing to the future, right, and doing better and better and better with their lives and having success, people are going to focus on creating excuses and creating defenses and defending themselves because they feel attacked, right? And so you're just destroying the time that could have been used productively, crushing it, getting like just pushing it away. And instead letting them, like, they're being forced to defend themselves instead of working towards that overarching growth that's gonna have the biggest impact on their life. This philosophy and this mentality is so freaking huge. It changes absolutely everything. And you see it with Theodore Roosevelt. When he was president and when he was confronted with a perplexing problem, he would lean back and he would look at this huge, huge, huge painting of Lincoln in the Oval Office. And he would say, like, what would Lincoln do if he was in this issue? What would he do to solve this problem? So the next time that like you've got this huge issue and there's all this pressure and all this negativity and all this anger, you know, pull out like that $5 bill, say, what would Lincoln do if he was in my shoes? How would he react positively? And instead of, you know, getting pissed at somebody or screaming at them, figure out how to handle it positively. Figure out how to connect with them and move towards that greater overarching future where you're both achieving the goals and the desires and the dreams that you have with total and complete positivity and no negative. Because the instant that happens, everything changes and your whole life becomes happy and delightful, and it's the best freaking feeling on the planet. It's amazing. It's just so powerful. So hope you guys got a ton of value from this. Go out there, apply it, absolutely crush it. And I will see you in the next module. Thank you so much. Bye.